Well, hello and welcome back to another video. You join me here outside Leeds station. Yes, I know, Leeds again. I'm sick of the place myself, to be honest. But we're here today to ride the Settle Carlisle Line on its very special 150th birthday. But before we get into that, we of course have to make the inevitable, very important stop off at McDonald's. And about 5-10 minutes later, I've got my breakfast, I've got my nice raspberry lemonade drink. So now, let's get going up to the platform.
The next train to depart platform 3B will be the
Working hour train today is going to be a 3 carriage class 158, 158-754, which is going to be working the 0918 service from here in Leeds all the way to Carlisle, where we'll be due to arrive at 12:02. And after a little bit of a wait on the platform, it's boarding time. And just like that, we leave Leeds about 2 minutes late, just a slight delay with the red signal there. And as you can see, leaving Leeds here, it is a glorious, glorious sunny day. However, as you may know, a sunny day is not always good for filming out the windows. But we'll deal with them problems when it comes to it a little bit later in the journey. Now, before making our way onto the Settle Carlisle Line, we've got a few stops to make along the way, including the West Yorkshire commuter towns of Shipley and Bingley. And the last stop on this service in West Yorkshire and home to the Keighley Valley Railway, Keighley. We then, shortly after crossing the border into North Yorkshire, arrive into Skipton, which is affectionately known as the gateway to the Dales. Now, this bit of track here between Skipton and Settle Junction, calling at Gargrave, Hellifield and Preston, we have already covered on the Bentham Line episode of the Riding the Railway Like series, the actual very first episode I did, so that's there for you to go check out if you so wish. But for now, let's make our way all the way to Settle, where we can start our journey officially along the Settle and Carlisle Line. And with the sun blaring directly onto us now, we arrive into the first station along the Settle and Carlisle Line, Settle. Settle was opened on the 1st of May 1876, initially called Settle New Station to distinguish it from an earlier nearby terminus. Today, the station building is a Grade 2 listed building, meaning it's now a protected building. And this is also Settle Station, is where the trolley service comes on. And I believe this is the only service ran by Northern to have a trolley service. However, the trolley service is ran by a local company and not actually Northern at all. Now, as we leave Settle, we get some absolutely stunning scenery, and this is where the scenery really does start to open up. I must say, it was very, 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 very hot in the sun. However, it was worth it because we did get some great views. And before long, the views of the three peaks started to come into view, the first of which is Pen y Ghent, the smallest of the three, the other two being Ingleborough and Whernside, which we will see later on. And that view of Pen y Ghent means one thing: we're now arriving into our next stop along the Settle and Carlisle line, Horton-In-Ribblesdale. Now, Horton-In-Ribblesdale again was opened on the 1st of May 1876, originally called Horton, however later renamed to Horton-In-Ribblesdale in 1927 to avoid confusion with other places. Now, just recently, the last couple of years, the station has seen some upgrades, including new footbridges in order to replace the crossing. However, I'm not too sure whether they're going to keep that for people who need step-free access. I'm not 100% sure what's going on with that. However, they have done a very nice job with the footbridge, and I quite like it. However, some people that you know, they've got an opinion because it's something new, and people can't take new things, can they? And as we make our way towards Ribblehead now, let's take a look at some of the history of the line. So the line was built by the Midland Railway as a strategic response to its dependence on a rival route into Scotland. At the time, they had to use the tracks competing with the London and North Western Railway via the West Coast Main Line. However, in 1869, construction began on a new route, and it became one of the most difficult railway projects in Britain. The route passes through some of the most rugged terrain, deep valleys, limestone scars, remote moorland, unstable ground. And this route included 16 major viaducts being built, 21 tunnels, and extensive cuttings and embankments. However, working conditions for the navvies who built this line were harsh, with cold winters and flooding, accidents and fatalities, as well as illnesses and diseases, contributing to many deaths during the building of the line. The remote locations also made supply difficult. Costs spiralled well beyond initial estimates, placing heavy strain on the Midland Railway. However, eventually the line opened for goods traffic in 1875 and passengers in 1876, and once completed, it provided a direct Midland-owned route between the Midlands, London and Scotland, a scenic but demanding alternative to the coastal routes, and a new strategic independence from the London and North Western Railway. And just like that, we're now arriving into Ribblehead, and you might just have been able to catch a glimpse of the Ribblehead Viaduct. And as we make our way out of Ribblehead Station, which is staggered platform station by the way, very cool, we are about to cross the very famous Ribblehead Viaduct. Now, work on the Ribblehead Viaduct began in 1870 under the Midland Railway's direction. It was led by engineer John Sidney Crosley. The Ribblehead Viaduct features 24 stone arches. It's around 400 metres or 440 yards long, built from local limestone, and reaches about 32 metres, 105 feet at its highest point. Now, as with the rest of the line, this was not an easy build. Thousands of navvies that built this viaduct and their families lived in temporary settlements on Batty Moss, which is the area that the viaduct crosses, while it was being built. Now, these camps were overcrowded and basic, so there were many diseases such as cholera and typhoid fever. I think I'm saying that right. That is spread through contaminated water. Medical help was limited and often far away, so serious illnesses could quickly become life-threatening. The viaduct required dangerous heavy labour at high and in unstable conditions. Workers had to build scaffolding many metres above the valley floor. Stone blocks were hoisted using ropes and early lifting gear. Arches had to be built with precision while supporting their own weight, and many accidents occurred, including falls, being struck by falling stone, crushing injuries from collapsing supports or misjudged loads, because safety standards were very minimal compared to modern engineering. The Yorkshire Dales also, of course, extreme weather conditions. It's out in the open, heavy rainfall, flooding, strong winds, cold winters. So it was very, very, very difficult. The viaduct also sits on deep peat bog, which is unstable and waterlogged, which meant foundations had to be sunk deep into soft ground to reach stable layers. Some areas required drainage work before construction could even begin. Uneven settling risked long-term structural instability. There were no nearby large towns large enough to support the workforce. Materials had to be transported over rough terrain or temporary rail tracks, and food supplies were constantly strained. And we're passing through another one of the most toughest structures on the line to be built, the Bleay Moor Tunnel, situated between Ribblehead and Dent. Similar to what happened at Ribblehead, there were many factors that made this difficult to build. You had working underground in darkness, poor ventilation, heat and damp, explosives and accidents as well, diseases and living conditions. But eventually it was built. This is around the same time as the Ribblehead Viaduct was built, and it was built to pass under Bleay Moor instead of going over it. Now, instead of looking at those great views from this far away, I'm going to cut in some clips now of over in that footage, but just a different time when I rode the line. Good views. We might be down there later, who knows? And would you look at that, we've now made it to Dent Station. Now, Dent Station is actually the highest mainline railway station in England in terms of altitude above sea level. Now, the funny thing about Dent Station is it is actually about 4 or 5 miles away from the actual village of Dent that it serves. The station was named after the nearest significant settlement, but because of the geography and the terrain and that sort of thing of the line, it meant that engineers had to place it high on the hillside. Now, the station was opened in 1877, just shortly after the rest of the line opened. It was built in the traditional Midland Railway stone style, which is something you will see across the whole network. It's very, very distinctive, and throughout all the stations on this line, as you will see. And not long after leaving Dent, we arrive into our next station of Garsdale. Now, Garsdale opened in 1876, as well as quite a number of different stations on this line were. Now, Garsdale was originally named Hawes Junction, as it served as a junction for a branch line to the town of Hawes. That is now non-existent, that does not exist anymore, but that's not the only thing that Garsdale is known for. Garsdale is also known for Russup the dog. Russup was a border collie dog owned by Graham Nuttall, who was a key member of the Friends of the Settle Carlisle Line group. Now, Nuttall was deeply involved in opposing British Rail's plan in the 1980s to close the Settle Carlisle route, which we'll touch upon more in a little bit. Now, in the heat of all this, him and Russup travelled along the line extensively, and they helped gather thousands of signatures for petitions, with Russup becoming a familiar and symbolic presence at stations and events. Now, Russup is said to be the only dog to vote in a public ballot. Now, in 1990, Graham went walking on the fells near Garsdale and died after suffering either a fall or a medical emergency. Now, Russup stayed with him and remained by his side for around 11 weeks and somehow managed to survive in the harsh moorland conditions, likely drinking from streams and enduring extreme weather. And eventually, when Russet was found, he was weak and close to death, but was still right by his owner's side. Now, Russet was taken in and cared for after being found, but he was too weak to recover and died shortly after. And now his memorial that you've just seen there at Garsdale is recognised by many. Now seems like the perfect opportunity while we're rolling through this beautiful countryside scenery to take a minute to have a look at why the Settle Carlisle Line was almost permanently shut down. See, by the 1970s and early 1980s, British Rail was under heavy pressure to reduce costs and streamline the network, and the Settle Carlisle Line was targeted because it ran through sparsely populated areas. Passenger numbers at the time were relatively low, maintenance costs were very high, especially for structures like the Ribblehead Viaduct, the Arton-Gill Viaduct, the tunnels as well, and there were already alternative, quicker Anglo-Scottish routes like the West Coast Main Line. And in 1984, British Rail formally proposed closing the line to passengers. Their argument focused on ongoing maintenance liabilities, claims that freight use was declining, and the idea that buses or other routes could replace these services. However, critics argued that British Rail had deliberately run down services to be able to justify closure, failed to properly account for freight and diversionary use, and underestimated the line's long-term value. And the proposals, obviously, as you can imagine, triggered a huge public response, including the Friends of the Settle and Carlisle Line, Graham and Russet, as we've just mentioned. And what made this campaign unusual for that time for a railway line was its scale. Tens of thousands of signatures were collected, public meetings across the country, and media coverage turned this into a big issue. Now, there were several things that weakened their case, and that was the importance for freight, the strategic value, and ultimately, after years of debate, the line was eventually saved and the closure was rejected in 1989. And just like that, we're now arriving into our next station along the line, Kirkby Stephen. Now, despite the name of the station, it is not in Kirkby Stephen itself. It's about 1.5 miles away from the centre. Now, at the time, to avoid confusion with another station in the town, which was on a different line, this station was originally called Kirkby Stephen West, with the original Kirkby Stephen East belonging to a different railway that's now closed and is now part of the Stainmore Railway, which we did have a little ride on when we came here for the Vintage Easter Rally. Go check that out if you haven't already, highly recommended. The station, along with all the other lines, opened in 1876, and this was designed to be a more substantial station and a key access point for the Eden Valley, capable of handling both passengers and freight. And this is why there's so much here. There's a goods yard, sidings, a signal box, all that sort of stuff. So this was probably one of the larger populations than most stations on the route, handling agricultural goods, livestock, general freight as well, and it acted as a passing point on a busy double-track main line.
I'll get stuff done tomorrow, but it's May actually, so I'll just write it down. As from May, I'm busy, so it's nothing to do with it. If I need to tell you, I'll tell you. Just keep got it written down.
And now, as we make our way towards the next station, Appleby, through some beautiful Cumbria scenery, I'm going to shut up for a little bit and let you enjoy the scenery.
So I've got 2 miles of scenery. Top Attic. That's just the labels. Tomato seeds. Down and across. So you got the seeds.
All the strings. I used to go to that grade with
Yeah.
it's that sort of thing. The weather was amazingly good in Britain.
When we used to do the exchange rates,
Mr. A, Mr. B, Mr. C.
For the day
Mrs.
when
His
all the
wife,
boys
such
were
like it, have lied. And that is amazing. What I need to do is say, well, have you been told because this, that has been proven lie?
2 nights there
So
with
under
these
investigation
nice music
for A, B and C.
2 nights we're going into Munster. So what language? Jim was my name.
Don't forget, it's not like right. If he has to refer to the lyrics, I don't know the woman who it is.
So I did finish I'm still in touch with the friends I made. Yeah, we see them in June. When I met them, I had to go be an assistant in school. So I was 20.
And we're now arriving into our next station, Appleby. Now, Appleby opened, you guessed it, in 1876, along with the rest of the line. Now, Appleby was already an established town at the time, which is why this station was built on a larger, more permanent scale than many of the others on this line. Some of its original features include a substantial stone station building, multiple platforms. It had a goods yard as well, and freight facilities, because this was to be such a big station. And when it came to that 1980s argument about the closure of the Settle Carlisle Line, this station, Appleby, was one of the main reasons why this line was kept open, because it served a proper, real population. It demonstrated the line still had practical use as well, and that was really one of the key reasons why they decided the line should stay open. Oh look, there's me. Hello, me. And we're now arriving into our next stop of Langwathby. Now, I would want to call it Langwathby, but the announcements say Langwathby, so we'll say Langwathby. Now, this station opened in 1876, who would have thought? And it was built in the Midland Railway's distinctive style. It's stone buildings, carefully designed platforms, all that sort of stuff that you can see throughout the rest of the line. Now, one of the most distinctive things about Langwathby station is that it remained staffed for much longer than most rural stations on the line, and for years it was the only intermediate station on the route with regular staff presence. And we're now arriving into the penultimate stop before Carlisle, Lazonby and Kirkoswald. Now, this station was opened in, 2 guesses. Did you say 1876 by any chance? Because if you did, you'd be correct. Now, originally it was simply called Lazonby, however it was later changed to reflect both communities it served, the villages of Lazonby and Kirkoswald, and just basically the same as all the other stations. It's kept that Midland Railway theme. and it used to have a goods yard and a sidings, as well as staff buildings for tickets and operations. It no longer has any of these things. And unlike a lot of stations on this line, this does not really have tourist or heritage value as such. This is more a real community station that is really just mainly used by the community.
That's Albania thing. Yeah, so that's all.
And we're now arriving into the final stop before Carlisle, and personally one of my favourites on the line, Armathwaite. Now Armathwaite opened in 1876 along with the rest of the line, and just the same as all the Midland railway stations, it was built with solid stone buildings, 2 platforms. And the thing that for me sets this apart from all the other stations, especially when I visited all the stations in this line a couple of years ago, the thing that stuck out to me, you're about to see it on screen any second. Now, there we go. That there is the Armathwaite signal box, which is a brilliantly preserved signal box here in Armathwaite. I visited that. It was the most fantastic experience, and if you are in the area, highly recommend it. Okay, and I think we should now address the elephant in the room. The title of this video, the whole reason I did this journey for this specific weekend upload, and that is that this week, specifically the 1st of May, marked the 150th birthday of the Settle and Carlisle line, the 150th anniversary of the first ever passenger train. Now, the reason that's significant is it makes it one of the oldest continuously operating lines in the UK. It's a rare example of Victorian Railway still functioning largely along its original route, and it's also just a big massive success story, really, isn't it, about how all these navvies and all these engineers made such brilliant structures and such a fantastic railway line with such little really machinery, very basic stuff, through such tough terrain to make this fantastic railway line. And as I say, the navvies and engineers who worked in harsh conditions across the Dales and across all this landscape are a big part of the story, and they are really the ones who are being celebrated. And to celebrate this event, celebrations included special train services, exhibitions at stations such as Appleby and Settle, and community events. And the community is a big part of the Settle and Carlisle Railway. You've got walking groups, and you've got the Friends of Settle and Carlisle Line, and it's just amazing, really. And with all that waffling, look at that, we've reached Carlisle. So shall we have a look at a little bit of a history of Carlisle? So Carlisle Station opened long before the Settle and Carlisle Station. It opened in 1847, and by the time the Settle and Carlisle line arrived, it was already a key gateway between England and Scotland. The station is notable for its large curved platform layout, and it's under the impressive roof that you see as the point now. It is also a major hub for services on the West Coast Main Line, north, south, with Avanti West Coast, ScotRail, Northern, all meeting at the station. And today it is a major operational hub, the end of the Settle and Carlisle line, or beginning, depending which way you're going. And it's really it's a very modern feeling station that retains much of its historic character. It's really quite an impressive station. I really. And just like that, all that said and done now, that fantastic ride up the fantastic Settle and Carlisle line has now come to an end at just roughly about just under 3 hours. after we first left Leeds. I really do hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, give this video a like, subscribe, leave a comment. And if you happen to have any memories, if you're a regular on this line, or if you've travelled up it for holidays maybe, leave them down in the comments below. I would love to read them. And that's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Bye.